Hello, Legacy Savers, Marsh here. So today we're going to talk about general form of circles and ellipses. You're going to watch your conics foldable and then some kind of writing utensil today. Today is completing the square round 2. So we're going to basically be completing the square. Now you're going to be like, ooh, Marsh, what was that? We're going to talk about the steps here in a little bit. So a conic can be written in this particular form. This is called a general second degree equation. Notice that there is x squareds and y squareds and stuff with x's and just x and y, and there's a lot of information here. Okay, so any conic can be written in this form. Ultimately, if I FOILed out a circle, so I squared the x minus 1s and I squared the y plus 2s, I would get the bottom equation there. If I did an ellipse and I multiplied it out and I took care of that division and all that business, I would ultimately get that kind of equation. So what we're looking at is, what if I am given this version of an equation and I want to get it to look back to there, is what our focus is today. Because we need to know first, though, which conic is it when it's been multiplied out. Very easily you can see who's squared, and also looking at coefficients in front of the squared terms and their signs. When it's a circle, you're going to find that both the x and y have squared terms, and their coefficients are going to be the same number and the same sign. So notice this guy has a 1 and so does this guy. That is how I know that this is a circle. If you have an ellipse, you still have both in y squared, x and y squared. They have the same sign, but they're going to be different numbers. So like this is an x squared and a y squared, but this has a 4 and this one has a 1. Okay, so we're noticing a little different. That's the difference between a circle and an ellipse while we're identifying them. Now, what if you wanted to graph the equation, but it's in general form? You need to be able to get it to standard or conic form so we can actually see the equation. Here is how we're going to complete the square. This is steps that you've taken before. You do not need to write these down in your foldable. However, maybe write them on your notebook if you feel like you need to, because this information is going to be almost every single problem actually this time. So we're going to group the x's and the y's, the dogs with the dogs, cats with the cats, and then send the constant numbers to the other side of the equal sign. So all the things with x's are going to go by each other, and all the things with y's are going to go by each other. The coefficient of x squared and y squared must be 1. If it's not, we're going to factor it out. Then we're going to take the number before the x, divide by 2, and square it. That's how we found that blank. Remember finding blank? I know, long time ago. But that's ultimately how we're going to do it. We're going to do the same for the number before the y. We're going to add those numbers to both sides of the equation. We're going to multiply by the common factor, number 2, if it's needed, and then we will factor. I know, lots and lots of steps. The only way to basically do these very well is to do a bunch of problems. So let's take a look at the first problem. First thing though, let's identify which conic section it is. So I'm looking, there is an x squared and a y squared, so that's coolio. But they're different numbers, right? There's a 36 in front of the x and a 1 in front of the y squared. Because of that, I know this is an ellipse that we are going to be placing in standard form. So what I'm going to first do is put the guys with the x's together and the guys with the y's together, and then kick the constant number, just the number, to the other side. Notice there's no other x in here, just the 36x squared. So I'm just going to leave him to be on his own. And the y squared, so I'm going to make sure all the things with y are together. And I'm going to kick the 27 to the other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the numbers in front of the squareds. So 36 needs to be factored outside of the x squared. And then what I'm also going to do is put the y squared minus 6y inside parentheses as well. So I can kind of see them separated. I don't have to divide or do any completing the square with this x squared because there's no y term or no middle term, x term. So he's just going to stay like that. But I do need to take care of this y squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a blank to that side. And if I add blank over here, I do also have to add blank to the right. Notice it will be 1 times blank is what's going to happen over here. So we're just going to have to be able to put a blank there. And I'm going to make a note that this is the y blank because by the end we will get x and y's blanks on different problems. So we want to make sure we kind of notate. To find y, remember, we're going to take this middle number right here. We're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square it. So that would be 3 squared. This will be a 9. Okay, 27 plus 9 is 36. I now can factor y squared minus 6y plus 9. That is the terms y minus 3 squared. Y minus 3 times y minus 3 is what that factored into. Okay, rewrite my x squared guy. Now, remember, ellipses, they have to be equal to 1, right? There's denominators usually. So I'm going to divide by 36. My final answer, x squared over 1 plus y minus 3 squared over 36 is equal to 1. There is my ellipse. This ellipse has a center of 0, 3. It has vertices that are 6 away, up and down. I know all the information that happened to an ellipse. Now you can just graph it if you wanted to. Let's try another problem. So this one, x squared plus y squared plus 16x minus 2y plus 38 is equal to 0. First thing, let's identify which conic. Notice it has an x squared and a y squared. They're both the same sign, and they both have the same number. By that, that tells us we have a circle on this problem. So now, let's group the dogs with the dogs and the cats with the cats. So let's put the x squareds and the x's all together and the y's all together. So I'm going to do that here, just kind of move it around. And I'm going to shift that 38 to the other side. Now, I'm going to make sure there's no numbers out front of those guys, but I'm going to put some parentheses around them. Like that. Okay. Now, I need to make room for blank. So I'm going to put a blank for the x's, blank for the y's. Then I'm going to make sure I add those blanks to this side as well. Notice this will be 1 times the number, so I do not have to worry about it here. We will have problems that's going to show up. So I'm just notating it now so you're paying attention. I got to find the blank, so I'm going to go 16 divided by 2. That would give me 8. And then I square that. That'll give me 64. I'm going to do the same thing with 2. 2 divided by 2 squared is 1. Transfer my information over here. Ooh, negative 38 plus 64 plus 1. Let's get my calculator here. 27 is what we're getting there. Okay. Let's factor out y squared minus 2y plus 1. That would be y minus 1 squared, right? Plus, let's factor the x's now. 2 numbers that multiply will be x and x, and then 8, both positive, squared. And since this is a circle, we do not need to solve any further because a circle is always equal to the radius squared. So this circle has a center of negative 8, 1, and has a radius of the square root of 27. Let's try another one. So this guy, looking at this one, 9x squared plus 4y squared minus 90x minus 8y plus 193. First thing is I know it's an ellipse, and that is because there's an x squared and a y squared. They're both the same sign, but they have different numbers. So I'm going to first group the people together. So 9x squared minus 90x plus 4y squared minus 8y, and I'll make that equal to a negative 193. There are numbers in front of our squareds, so I do need to factor that out when I do my grouping of my x's and y's. So I'm going to factor out a 9 in front of the x squared, which would make this a 10x, right? Because I take out the 9, dividing that by 9. I am going to put the blank there. Do the same thing with my y's. There we go. And here's the cool thing, or here's the evil thing about this. Since this is a blank, this is not just blank that I'm going to add. I'm going to add 9 times that blank. So over here, I'm going to make notes that that's what I'm also having to do. I'm going to have to multiply 9 times whatever I find for the blank and 4 times whatever the blank. I would recommend putting that on the right-hand side as well. Otherwise, you will forget to multiply, and then you're going to be like, why aren't these numbers dividing? And that is a very common error. Let's find blank. So let's divide 10 by 2 and then square it, which would give us 25. And then let's divide this 2 by 2 and square it. That'll be a 1. So over here, I have negative 193 plus 9 times 25 plus 4. 46 is the right-hand side. Over here, if I factor x squared, here I'll show my quick factor, be x and x, right? 5 and 5 to make 25, both negative, so I get that negative 10. So if I write that quick-hand, it's x minus 5 quantity squared. Notice that 9 is just kind of coming along for the ride for a little bit. Doing the same thing for my y's, I'll get y minus 1 squared. Now, I need to be equal to 1. It is an ellipse. So I'm going to divide by 36. I will get x minus 5 squared over 4. That's because the 9 and the 36 simplified. And y minus 1 squared over 9 is equal to 1. I actually kind of like completing the square. It's kind of fun. Let's try the last one of the video. So this conic, first thing, identify which one is he? Circle or an ellipse? You're right, it's a circle because they both have the same number and we also have an x squared and a y squared. So let's group the people together. There we go. So now let's put the x squareds together. Notice I do not have to factor anything out in this one. That's super awesome. But I'm going to put them with their parenthesis buddies here. And then I also am going to notate that I have an x blank and a y blank. To find blank, I'm going to go negative 12 divided by 2 and square. That's going to give me 36. Do the same thing with 8. 8 divided by 2 and square. That will be 16, I believe. So if I factor x squared minus 12x plus 36, I will get x plus 6 squared. If I factor y squared minus 8y plus 16, I will get y minus 4 squared. You know what? I forgot to add my guys over here. What is 29 plus 36 plus 16? 81 is the answer there. And since this is a circle, I do not have to divide by that 81. Final answer. And that is the end of this video. Completing the square does take a little bit, and there's a couple of pitfalls. However, once you get the steps down, it's actually quite an easy process. You just got to get the steps down, which ultimately comes just from practice. When we get to class, we will be working on the assignment for it, and we'll do a couple of examples together as well. Until then, though, I will see you later, Sabers.